Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's a live discussion for The Expanse, Season 3, Episode 2, IFF. I'm joined here by some special guests where we're going to break down this episode, give our thoughts on it, and just talk about some things about all things Expanse. I'll mute myself. And so the one quick announcement I have to make is, and I was just telling these guys, is that there's some sort of construction work going on in the room next to me. So every once in a while, there might be some background noise. There's not much I can do about it, but I'll try to minimize it when I can. Anyway, let me introduce a great guest here to join me first. Joining us for the first time for the Expanse, D from Darrin's Reviews, or Darrin from D's Reviews. Thanks so much for joining me.
I can go either way. That's nice and easy. Hey, everyone. Yeah, I'm really excited. I've been really enjoying this show since first season. It's one of those fine little sci-fi series that really have quality back behind it. So I'm excited to get to chat about IFF tonight.
Cool. And joining me once again, Akton Tamko. Thanks so much for joining.
Yeah, of course. Looking forward to talking about this episode. And the characters are finally coming together. We're going to see Avricella and Holden on screen together sometime soon. So, I'm really excited to talk about this episode and where we're going forward from this. So, looking forward to it.
Cool. So let's just jump into the episode. Let's start with our overall feelings. How do we feel about this episode? I'll start with you, Darrin. What was your take on this IFF?
I really enjoyed it. The one thing that I think Expanse has done really well, starting with last season, is their pacing. They move things forward very quick. They're not messing around. Everything is really progressing really quick. So this season, as far as continuing the same thing, I enjoy the fact that we are getting some of these characters kind of back together again. I mean, we had Miller and Holden for a little bit, and then Miller had to head off to Venus. So, we're getting a lot more of the bigger characters together. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, and is it my turn?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Me too. And I'm actually, I don't believe Avricella and Holden, they've talked to each other through the communication thing, but I don't think they've actually been in the same room together. And I don't know that Bobby, I don't think have they ever encountered Bobby? I don't remember. But anyway, they're all coming together, and I think that's really exciting. And this episode overall, I agree completely with Darrin. I do really enjoy the pacing of the show. Always have. And they're not messing around. We're just getting to the point, and I do enjoy that about this show. I do have some questions about how things went down a little bit. I'm confused, and maybe you guys can clear it up, or maybe it was just not very good. I don't know, but we'll get to it when we get to it. But overall, I did really enjoy this episode, probably a little bit more than the first episode even. So, I did like this episode. Mark?
Yeah, that's interesting because I talked about this last week because this is the first season I'm watching after having read the books, and it gives me a different perspective. It's interesting hearing both of you guys who haven't read the books say you feel that the show's moving at a fast pace, because as a book reader, it seems to be moving slowly because this actually went by a lot faster in the books, and they're adding a lot of stuff to pad it out. But no, that's cool. I can definitely see that point of view, especially with season 1 definitely moved at too slow of a pace. And I do find that mostly season 1 was sort of a learning curve for the showrunners. I think they really got the groove in season 2, and I think we're seeing that continue here on season 3. It does seem to be moving at a good pace, I should say. Like, it's not like we haven't gotten any filler yet or anything like that. Like, every scene contributes to the story and adds to it. And this episode in particular, I think, was pretty exciting. I think it was probably, I said in my review, this is probably some of the best space battles we had on this show so far. Like, a lot of the space battles I thought were a bit sort of confusing, but this one was pretty straightforward, and I love how they use inertia a lot in the acceleration, and I think they did that in this episode almost more so than previous episodes. So it was really exciting, and like the music, cinematography, everything, I think it reminds me why I love this show so much. So cool. So let's go ahead and break down the different storylines. I want to start with Bobby Draper, Avasarala, and the Holden and Rocinante. Let's start first, because you mentioned this slightly about these characters coming together. So as people who haven't read the books, I'm a bit curious. Was this a shock for you? Was it surprising to see all these characters in one location by the end of the episode? Akton, you can go first.
No, I wouldn't say it was a shock to me. I mean, I did expect that, eventually these characters were going to have to come together. So I wouldn't say shocking. But I can go ahead and talk about my questions on how it went down. Like I didn't really understand why they would want to go rescue some I mean, I understand why Alex would, because he's Martian, but why would they want to risk their lives and shoot a UN ship, as Holden says at the end? Yeah, now we're in war with the UN. Great. Like, why would they want to risk all of that for some unknown Martian? Like, I don't understand why anyone on the ship besides Alex would go along with that. I had a bit of a hard time with that. It didn't make sense to me why they would do that. So that was my only. Maybe you have an explanation as to why they did that, but I didn't quite why are they doing this? I didn't quite get it.
Really? That's interesting, because in my review, I had kind of the opposite take. I didn't understand Holden's resistance to wanting to do it. Because especially, at first it was like a random Martian, whatever, but then they found out it was Julie Mal's ship. So that ties it to, since it's Julie Mal, that ties it to Jules Pierre Mal, so that ties it to the protomolecule and whatever. And since there's a ship flying around trying to be destroyed that's tied to Jules Pierre Mal, that's pretty much makes it a logical conclusion that it's tied to the overall protomolecule thing. So to me, that made it very clear, especially once they found that out, why Alex and Naomi was like, well, it's a given we're going after this ship, because this has to do with everything. And in fact, it could even help them with their current mission, where they're going to the Jules Pierre Mal outpost.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that does make sense once they found out it was Julie Mal's ship, but they were all on board before, or Naomi and Alex were both gung-ho about it before they even knew that. And even so, I mean, they're risking their lives for, just because it's Julie Mal's ship, it could be a dead end. It doesn't mean that it leads to anything. I'd still thought they were going way out of their way for what could have amounted to nothing and risk going at war with the UN. So even after they found out it was Julie Mal's ship, but certainly before they knew that, why would there be any reason for them to even consider risking their lives for random Martian? So I don't know. I still have a problem with it.
Yeah, I think for me, it's just what caught me was kind of Alex's response, because he's an ex-Martian, and he was just saying, we can't. We're going and we're saving these people. I'm still a soldier. I still believe I can't leave these people out there. So I think a lot of that was kind of Alex's push to hey, it's a Martian distress call. We have to help. Why aren't we helping? And then once they found out it was Julie Mal's, that kind of sent thing over. So that's sort of how I saw that sort of weighing apart. And yeah, I really enjoyed this. I mean, I love seeing Bobby coming in. I love Sandra their grouping kind of connecting. We're actually getting another Martian soldier. We're getting someone who's sort of a badass being added to the crew, which is nice. My only kind of criticism with this whole section is I know that they had these multiple storylines that they were playing throughout the episode, is because there was so much kind of intensity with this part, the fact that it kept getting broken up throughout the episode, which again, I understand they're mixing it in while they're telling these other storylines, kept pulling me out of it, especially all the Earth stuff that hours and hours seemed to pass while not that much time seemed to have with Holden and the crew and picking up Bobby's ship and everything. That's again, it's a small criticism, but it's the only thing that kind of every time they shifted and went somewhere else, I felt dropping out of it, and it was okay, now we're back into the excitement point. So again, minor criticism, but that was thing with the structure of the episode that did keep popping me out of that moment.
That's interesting because I think I've heard that criticism before, but I didn't actually feel that way. Actually, there was only one part in the episode where I did feel kind of jarring. It's like when Amos was like going to save Prax, and Prax's thing was off, and it was like really exciting. And then we cut to Jules Pierre Mal on Io. I'm like, I don't want to see this. I want to see this exciting thing. But that was the only time for me, really. And as far as like the time frame goes, a lot of episodes from a lot of different shows do this. I just assume that they're just taking place in different, like, not chronological order. Sort of the whole Game of Thrones conundrum. But yeah, and I just wanted to say in the chat, Allison Fordyce says that because it's the honor of those who travel far in space, you help each other because you want someone else to do the same for you. And this is something that's explained more in the novels. And I think they went into a little bit of detail on this way back in season 1 about how it's just a given when there's a distress call, you answer. It's like the unspoken rule, because if you're in that situation. And I do think, like, Alex did bring up the whole thing about, well, Holden, went after the Scopuli at the start, did that whole distress call, and Canterbury, and that was caused everything. Naomi did this whole thing with the Somnambulist and everything, so it's Alex's turn to get his due. So that's how I saw it. It's like, dude did it because Alex wanted to do it.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess that everybody's just going to get themselves involved. There's a war going on, so like, if you're rescuing somebody on one side of the war, then the other side of the war is against you now. So I don't think that should apply when there's a war. Okay, go ahead and do that, but now these other people want to kill you because there's a freaking war going on. So I think that should. I think when there's a war going on, you should be minding your own business. Like I don't know, but I don't know, because the Holden made the point at the end, like, well, now the UN wants to kill us. Well, great. I mean, you risk your lives just so now you're like, and whereas before they weren't. They're trying to stay under the radar so they can get their. They can help Prax. So now they have a target on them.
And I think what you just said helps me understand Holden's perspective more. Because to be honest, in fact, I went into this in my review. When I first watched the episode, I thought Holden was out of character for refusing, because their whole thing has been about helping people. They've always stopped along the way to help people. And it seems kind of hypocritical to me that he'd be willing to help Prax, but screw these other people in need. But you bring up some good points about the war, and if they're going to help everyone in the war, then they're going to bring one side against them. So I think that was sort of the conflict. You had Alex on one side making the argument, not making it, Holden on the other side making the argument you're making. So I kind of, in that way, I kind of think it worked.
Yeah. I think, but overall, I mean, I think the structure of those little battles was really cool. I mean, I loved the tension that we had with Bobby and Alessandra with that they had to stay out of the particular range of these missiles of the Earth ship, and they're having to push. But of course, she's not used to the high G's. I love Bobby. She was like, I could take 4 more of this and stand on my head. I'd be fine. Whereas, our UN girl is just passing out in the back. I mean, it was an interesting way to sort of keep that tension going. And then when it's not the Rocinante anymore, it's the Calandra.
I still call it the Rocinante.
Yeah. When they came in, I mean, I loved their sequence of firing off the missiles and blowing out that giant electrical kind of way to set off the missiles, plus having their missiles now guide Bobby's ship and sort of just sit there on point. I mean, really some very cool setups there. And at the end, when they blasted through and Alex was able to turn the ship and just shear the engines off of the UN ship. I mean, yes, Holden was right. We saved lives. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're not going to come after us. But just, I've loved seeing Alex's ability to manipulate this ship. He's an incredible pilot. It's always a blast to see what they come up with. So I really think, the space battles, all of that interaction, really handled well. Ming just has to be sure how to really lock down those locks to keep drills and tools from flying around the inside of the ship.
Now, I thought that was a really great touch. I really liked that scene. Like last week, Afkin, you and I talked about the scene where Bobby almost fell into the ship's engine, how that was kind of unnecessary. It was just there to create tension. Whereas this week, the thing with the tools flying around, like I actually think it worked. It made a lot of sense because it shows how inexperienced that Prax is, and that he would just doesn't know how to lock things down properly. And it also, again, this is a great show. It uses gravity and inertia and stuff the way most sci-fi shows don't, where there's tools. Loose tools is a life and death situation, and Amos has to do all this funky flying thing, which I thought was really awesome. Like the way every time the ship moved, he moved with it. So I actually really loved that sequence.
Yeah, I did too, and I agree with you. It was a much improved over last week's with Bobby Draper, almost falling off and hanging for her life. And oh god, I've seen that a million times. But this was definitely much less fake. It really did add tension to it. And on a side note here, I'm really interested in. To see how Amos's character has really developed, to see how he really seems to genuinely care about Prax. Whereas in the beginning of the first season, I don't know that I really felt that he cared about anyone except for Naomi, and that was more of an obsession than actually caring about her. It's really interesting to see how that character has developed and how he is willing to risk himself to, go and save Prax, even though Prax is the one who fucked it up. The whole everything about it I really liked.
Yeah, Amos is actually my favorite character on the Rossi because he's just so straightforward. He's probably the most honest. He tells you exactly how he feels. There's no manipulations. There's no side thing. You know always where he stands. You obviously don't want to get on his downside, on his bad side there. But yeah, he is one of the characters that just really stands out to me. I love how they've moved, and they've added depth. He does have some thinking process, and he does have this measure of loyalty. It took a while for Holden to earn that, but now Holden has it, and Naomi's lost it in a way because of her decision to work with the proto molecule and sort of give that up. So it was just I love seeing how his character has moved. He is, like I said, he's my favorite guy on the Rossi, I think.
Yeah, just before watching this season, I rewatched the first two seasons, also having read the books. I sort of noticed, I think they kind of fumbled Amos's character in the early part of the show because they made him a lot more adversarial than he was in the novels. And I think it didn't quite work for the story, and a lot of people complained. So in season 2, they tried to make him a bit more, like he was in the books, a bit more sort of have some quality to him. And the way they transitioned was a bit jarring at first. But I think they got into a flow now with him that they smoothed it out, and it totally makes sense for his character and the way he is now. So I totally buy his character story now. And I buy his relationship with Prax. I agree that was sort of a progression where at first he was like, well, who really cares about this guy? In fact, when we first met Prax, he was being a total dick to him. But I think we've seen the journey together, and I think it worked out really well. Cool. So one other thing I wanted to touch on is you mentioned earlier, Atkin, about the Rocinante attacking the UN ship and Holden saying, well, now we're at war with Earth, which I totally understand why he thinks that. But if you look at the bigger picture and stuff outside of his perspective that he's not aware of, may not necessarily be the case, because the ship he attacked wasn't on official UN business. It was a shady covert working directly for Ehrenreich, bypassing Gillis, because it was their mission was to kill Avasarala. And right. Gillis, the Secretary General, specifically said, apprehend her, but it was Ehrenreich. So the ship is, and I think they even said in the subtitles, Ehrenreich's UN destroyer. So this is working directly for him. So it's more of, and I think we'll probably get more into this next week's episode when Holden starts talking to Avasarala. He's more of involved in this internal struggle. He's got, by getting involved, they're now drawn into this internal struggle between Avasarala and Ehrenreich. And I don't think Holden's going to be very happy about that at all.
Well, that's one thing too. Also, I mean, it's like, yeah, okay, UN may be upset at the Rossi crew, but they don't know who they are. The ship was never identified. I mean, they've changed their engine signature and everything like that. Nobody saw anything, so I mean, that's you're declaring war against a shadow in that sense. It's not really something I think that Holden and the crew have to worry about so much. It's not like they're going to be put on the Earth's Most Wanted list, but they would, like you say, for Roselli, just because now they have Avasarala and Bobby. I mean, there's a personal reason to go after, but from a larger UN Earth versus Mars, I think they're probably still pretty safe.
Well, okay, so Holden is pretty much right, although he's got the details wrong. I mean, It's not really Earth that's after them. It's Ehrenreich who's after him, who's probably going to be after him a lot more than if it would be if it was just simply a UN versus Mars thing and Holden interrupted. This is like, you now have this woman I'm trying to kill, so you're a big target. So now it's actually even worse than if it had been if they had just interfered with the war. And Holden doesn't realize that. I mean, they don't know that. He thinks it's just, oh, well, we interfered with the UN versus Mars kind of thing, and now UN is after us. But it's actually even worse than that, because Ehrenreich will be targeting them directly because they have Avasarala and Bobby on their ship. So they now are actually in more danger than Holden thinks they are, to be honest. Because I mean, Ehrenreich is like really wants to kill Avasarala. So now they've got the target on the back.
Yeah, it is worse in that regard, where they can have Ehrenreich actively chase after him, but it's not. He doesn't have the whole official entire fleet of the UN chasing after him, which is what he thought. It's just the rogue elements that work for Ehrenreich. But those rogue elements will be gunning for him a lot more than had it just been a random ship. But it's not the entire like official UN fleet, so it is a different sort of. It's worse in some regards, but different in others. Cool. Cool. What else? Yeah, I wanted to touch more on getting back to Bobby Draper and Avasarala, because this is one of the things I loved about this episode was the interaction between them. I think like these are another two characters that are sort of fitting in nicely. We got some of their chemistry develop in season 2, and I think we're seeing that a bit more. And I love how like, you know, Bobby Draper was being all, you know, professional and just trying to make sure Avasarala is okay, but she's very uncomfortable in this situation, so she's deflecting. She has a lot of banter. It's like, oh, are you hitting on me and stuff like that, which I loved. I think that really worked. So what are your guys' opinion on this chemistry?
Actually, I really love that too. I love that line too. She's like, what was it? Like, pull your knees apart or something, pull your thighs apart or something like that. She said, if you're hitting on me, I'm really flattered. But yeah, I really love the interactions between these two characters, and yeah, how Bobby Draper is really, you know, all about business and taking things very seriously, and we got to get out of here. And Avasarala is kind of, yeah, she's kind of loopy. She's losing it. She's not having a good time. She can't handle all these G's, and was making jokes. And yeah, I thought that worked really well. I really actually, probably one of my favorite aspects of this episode, of these interactions between these characters. I thought that whole thing was great.
Well, I think one of the fun bits of the dynamic between the two of those also is you have Bobby, who is really focusing on the here and now and the immediate threat, whereas Avasarala is thinking of the larger picture all the time and the interactions and who it's going on. So I think all of it, even starting in the last episode and then moving on through this, seeing that dynamic of points of view coming in, I think was really interesting, because yeah, sometimes it's like your bigger picture doesn't matter. You need to stay alive for the exact moment. But to me, that also means with them joining up with the Rossi crew, it again adds all of these extra larger elements. Whereas, you know, Holden the crew is trying to survive and just put their point of view at the moment here, especially getting, you know, with Ming's daughter, which I thought was a wonderful move on their part, sort of as a crew, to follow up and support the rest, you know, one of the members of the crew that they made promises to. And now we have this kind of, obviously with Avasarala coming in, really larger picture kind of idea, and I'm really looking forward to seeing her interaction or further interaction with Holden, I guess, because they have talked before, but this more on an immediate point. But yeah, the bits between Bobby and Avasarala I thought was really good. Their character work is really top notch in this show.
Yeah, Allison Fordyce in the chat pointed out something I was about to point out. She says that I like the moment when Bobby gave her technical response and Avasarala said, "Speak, politician." And so that really shows the difference between it. And what it was, like, it was more like a military term she used. She's talking about the hammer lock. And she was like, I don't know what the fuck that means, speak, politician. Which I love that. That was another sort of great interaction between them. Yeah, I also like the what made the space battle so intense to me is that, again, the show's using inertia, it's using like acceleration the way that a lot of other sci-fi shows don't, where Bobby was in a situation where she could like go really fast and get away from the ship, but by doing so that would kill Avasarala because she's not trained for that kind of high speed, and plus her age does play a factor as well. And so she had to have this weird balance between trying to go fast to escape the ship and going at a speed that's not going to kill her. And I think that really made this episode intense.
Yeah, and I like that they add that a little bit more elements of realism, like what real space travel would probably be more like. Whereas, you know, in Star Trek they go warp 10 or whatever, and people just go. They, you know, there's no ill effects from it.
Inertial dampeners.
Yeah. It's the inertial dampers that makes everything work. But it's just like I like that it's more raw. You know, it's more like there are ill effects from space travel. Especially if you're not trained the way the Bobby Draper is. So I definitely like that added element to it.
Yeah, cool. So let's talk about sort of the implications of Bobby Draper and Avasarala coming aboard, meeting the Rocinante crew for the first time, because I thought that was interesting seeing the looks on their faces, especially Holden, because he was just like, oh, he knew he was not happy to see her, because they all know who Avasarala is because she's like a high-ranking politician. I'm sure she's on the news or whatever, but Holden has had some personal interactions between Avasarala back in season 2 during the incident when the asteroid almost hit. So he actually sort of knows her sort of on that personal level, and she was like trusting him in that situation. So he might be more aware that this Warhawk facade is just fake, but I still knows. But by seeing this like high-ranking UN official in his ship, he's just gotten involved in something huge that he probably does not want to be involved with.
Yeah, and I think he absolutely wants nothing to do with it. And we get a hint of that in the preview. I mean, if anyone feels spoiled by previews, then stop listening for a couple seconds. But in the preview, you get the sense that Bobby is like, no, this person could stop the war. We need to do something. And Holden's like, no, fuck that. Who cares? Like, we don't owe you anything. We gotta go, you know, help Prax. So it's like he's very much, you know, you can tell he's very much in not wanting anything to be involved with this crap at all. He wants nothing to do with it. Although I predict that eventually he will, but they will end up being involved in it whether they like it or not. But clearly, like, that is his initial reaction, like, oh crap, I don't want to be involved in this shit.
There. Sorry, I couldn't unmute myself there. Yeah, and I think, you know, it is going to be interesting because, of course, we're going to have this conflict, like you said, with Holden wanted to follow Praxis thing, and we're going to go and try and save the kid, and Alexander's going to be thinking, no, we need to contact, we need to, you know, let him know that I was set up, and, you know, warn Earth about Ehrenreich and everything. But of course, as we see, by following the Rossi, by going into to help Praxi, it's going to run back into Mao, which is what Alexandra is dealing with. You know, I mean, that's kind of the crux of her focus at the moment. So, yeah, they might butt heads for a moment, but they'll find out very quickly they're both in their own way fighting the same fight and going after the same thing. So I don't think any of that conflict will last for very much too long. And the truth of it is that it's Holden's ship and it's his crew, and where their crew has decided to go is where that ship is going to go first. If Bobby and her just has to sort of wait and ride this out until they can get somewhere else.
So, well, that's the other question I have. Are you guys as excited as I am to see these two characters interact finally? Because they've both been on the show since season 1. They both had their storylines doing their own things. It's kind of like the coming together of Miller and Holden at the end of season 1, but this is like even a longer wait to see these two interact. And plus, with Draper and the Rocinante crew in the mix, all of them interact there. I'm really excited. You guys are as excited to see them interact.
Yeah, I really am. Like, I've been wanting to see these characters get together, since the beginning. I thought maybe it would happen in season 2, but then season 2 went in a different direction. So yeah, I'm like, when are Holden and Avasarala going to get together? And honestly, you asked earlier if I was shocked. I wouldn't say shocked, but I was at this point. I'm like thinking, oh, it's going to be like, Game of Thrones with Jon and Dany. They'll meet in season 7 or whatever, like, or Tyrion and Dany didn't even meet till season 5. So it's just like, or 6 rather. No, it was 5. But so I'm thinking it's like, oh, probably season 5 or 6 or 7 they'll finally get together. So the fact that they are meeting up at the beginning of season 3, I am really, really excited. I'm really, really excited to see where we're going, and I can't wait to see these characters on screen together, especially as after Avasarala, is conscious again. It looks like she's going to be kind of out of it a little bit through the next episode, at least for part of it, probably. So once she's back, up on her feet again and able to really interact with Holden, I can't wait. I honestly can't wait. So I'm really excited for it.
Yeah, I was almost disappointed when the episode ended there. I was like, no, I want to see what happens. But yeah.
I like it because, again, it's increasing the stakes. When Holden ran into Miller and did that, it was kind of like the next level up. And then they dealt with that. And now with Alessandra in there, it increases the importance of what Holden and his crew is doing. They've been they're important. They're definitely integral with everything that's going on, but they've been playing with the sort of peripheral part of this interaction. And they did have that main bit when they were chasing the asteroid and they were doing all that. But now it gets them much more central in the conflict. And I think it increases the stakes on their choices and what they want to do. And the fact is, you do have now really an Earth and Mars crew, Earth, Mars, and the Belt. All are represented, I think, strongly inside the Rossi crew now. And that's only going to play stronger and forward as you realize that it's not about, the politics are about the people up above, the people that are really involved, that are really fighting, that are really paying the price. This is their chance to really come in and make that statement and show that we need to work together and stop being constantly at odds. So I think that's one element that's really going to be playing a lot further on as the season progresses.
Yeah, and you just touched on something that I wanted to talk that sort of came up earlier with the Draper and Avasarala scene when they pointed out that Avasarala was laughing at the fact that a Martian Marine was willing to risk her life because Draper had that attitude, like she could have just flown away, killed Avasarala, and got off away free, but she had the attitude is like, no, Avasarala, if she doesn't make it, I'm not going to make it. Like she was risking her own life. She said, I'd rather die than let her die. And so that dynamic was really shocking to Avasarala. The irony of it that a Martian Marine would be willing to do that. But I love Bobby's response was that we're both on the same side, the right side. And I think that sort of attitude or that perspective will probably prevail with their interactions with the Rocinante crew as well.
Well, yeah, because in some ways the people running the war, Aaron right on one side, Mao, kind of in the middle there, and then with Mars, it's almost like just the battle for the protoform, for the protomolecule, and their own sense of power. Whereas the rest of the crew, like you said, the Rocinante are now They're fighting for what's right, the survival of humanity and everybody working together. So it kind of gets that interesting dynamic. Again, less politics and more the people that are on the right side versus the people that are kind of fucking with everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a dynamic I'm really, really interested to see. Cool. So, Atkin, do you have any further thoughts on this storyline before we move on?
No, I think I got to say everything that I wanted to say on the storyline, so I'm good with moving on.
Cool. So let's move on. We're introduced to a new character in this
Juliet. Juliet.
Yes, Juliet from Lost. So, did you know that she was going to be in season 3, or were you surprised to see her?
No, I read that she was going to be in it, so I didn't know that she was going to be in it.
Yeah, because I had read this a while ago as well. I knew she was coming, and like she was playing. So Pastor Anna is the character we're introduced to, or that's how she was referred to in the books, as Pastor Anna. Her name's like Anna Volovodov. I think I got that right. It was always hard for me to pronounce, so I just call her Pastor Anna. So this is a character sort of similar to what they did last year with Bobby Draper. This character is in the novels is introduced in book 3, so they're introducing her a bit earlier and having her involved in the season 2 storyline, which she wasn't involved with at all in the novel, since she wasn't friends with the Secretary General. That was actually a different character, so they're sort of combining characters and having her in. But I think this is a great dynamic. And when I found out that Elizabeth Mitchell would be playing her, I was like, wow, that is great casting. To me, that's like perfect casting. Although in the novel, she did have a Russian accent. She didn't really have one now, but not a big thing. But I think this is going to really... I think this is a great character introduction, because in the novels, I never really thought that highly of this character. It's like she was okay, but in this episode, I was like, wow, this has me really fascinated to see more about this character, because we talked about last week how, Aaron Wright's sort of running around telling the Secretary General what to do because nobody's there to be the voice of reason, but now we're introduced to this character who's obviously there to be the voice of reason. And I think this is really going to shake things up a bit. So, So, Apkin, your thoughts on Pastor Anna?
Yeah, it was... when I first saw the character, I'm stuck on the fact that it's Elizabeth Mitchell as Juliet. So I had it took me a little bit to get into who is this character. When they first show her at the protest, it's like she could be anybody. You just don't know anything about her. And she seemed to be very important because she was able to order those soldiers around. But once we start to get introduced to this character, that at least in the show, I guess she's a former friend of the Secretary General. She is a pastor, and the Secretary General makes a comment that I never even thought you would go to church, let alone run one. Which implies that there was a change over time, because she's also a doctor. They said Dr. Pastor Anna at some point. Is that correct, Mark? She's also...
I think the doctor might be referring to a doctorate rather than a medical doctor.
Because didn't she help out? She knew how to help out that dude in the protest.
Oh, yeah, she did.
She had some kind of medical knowledge.
When the protest, I think she has some kind of, but she's not so much of it. Because when he asked, are you a doctor? She's just of sorts. So,
oh, okay. Yeah. But anyways, once we start really getting to know this character a little bit more, I'm really interested in the dynamic of her and being there with Aaron Wright and the Secretary General. I get the sense that Aaron Wright already can pick up on the fact that she's a potential danger to his plan. She could be that bird in the ear to the Secretary General, hey, maybe this war is not a good idea, that she could be an influence on him in the other direction, possibly. I don't think Aaron Wright likes her very much. I don't think he trusts her, and that's good. I like that. I think this does help with my issues with episode 1, where the Secretary General seemed to do whatever Aaron Wright said, he's under mind control or something. Then now we have this other character thrown into the mix, I think that makes things a lot more interesting. So yeah, I am looking forward to seeing how she fits in, and I like the introduction of this character.
Yeah, I think it's always good when you have somebody who is unafraid to say no or speak their mind in the midst of power. Especially, Acton. That's the one thing about the Secretary General is like getting Jedi mind tricked by Aaron Wright all the time. Well, I think we need to look for peace in all the issues. No, we need to go to war. Well, I guess we need to go to war. It just seems to be where he follows up. The initial introduction. I mean, yes, I'm always going to think Lost whenever I see her. But that to me, that introduction in with the crowd and the riot police and such was a little weak. It was a little weird because it felt a little out of place to me. Like, who is this person popping up and giving orders? And nothing was ever said of who she really was at the moment. So why anybody was listening to her? I know that they're using that to introduce her being different from the UN police and that she is her own individual and she cares about people. I mean, I get that. I felt that scene was a little clunky. Once they got past it and into the rest of the stuff, I enjoyed it a lot more. I mean, I could see where she's coming from. I like the fact, like I said, that she's willing to speak her mind, to stand up to Aaron Wright, to just, disagree with him straight out. Because she doesn't care whether she's there or not. And I think that's the positive end. She has been summoned. So I think she feels it's like, well, if you want me here, then you want me here. So I'm going to be who I am. I don't care about, being a yes person. She doesn't have any stake inside of anything here outside of getting funding for her little project down there. So again, the first scene kind of threw me off, but I did like it once we got more into her and she was establishing where her dynamic was going to be amidst these very powerful people.
That's interesting because I didn't find that scene jarring at all. I thought it was a great introduction, but that might have to do with the fact that I knew it was coming. Like, I knew from trailers and production leaks that this character was coming and was going to be introduced in this episode. And from reading the books, I knew who the character was. So that probably helped it feel less jarring to me.
Well, I think, Mark, that's the key, that you knew who this character was. Because I kind of agree with Darrin. Like, I didn't know who this character was. I was like, okay, she's been in a lot of protests. Was she a protester? She's a doctor. Like, I was confused a little bit. Not having read the books, having no background on this character. Yes, I knew Elizabeth Mitchell was going to be in the show, but I didn't have any idea who this character was. And I'm sure it works fine if you have read the books and you already know the background of this character. But I think for me and Darrin, we had no idea who this character was. It was kind of a weird introduction to her. I found myself confused by it, but that didn't last very long. And once we started to get into this character, when she met the Secretary General, it all was clear and it was fine. So it's not really a big deal. But I definitely see where Darrin's coming from there.
Okay. I mean, well, they did change her character a bit from the novels. Like, her whole backstory that they presented in this episode is pretty much different from the novels. And so I thought the introduction, the way, not just that scene, but I think that scene did a really good job of establishing her character traits, the type of person that she is. If not, and I think they got more into detail later on in later scenes about exactly like the details about who she is. But I think that first scene was great in establishing the kind of person that she is, that she doesn't give a fuck about, those police or whatever, and she's more concerned with the people and that she's for the people. So I find that interesting. I could see how it could be jarring for some people, but I think it is like they should just throw up this character. You don't know who it is, but you slowly just discern throughout the episode who she is, and I think that method can work. And so the character we're introduced to here, which again, this is kind of different from the novels, is that she was a speechwriter. Apparently, we find out later on she wrote this epic speech that is like this other kid saying, "Oh, I had to learn this speech in school that the Secretary General would give." And she said, "Yes, I share the blame." And I think that nuance was lost on that kid who was talking to her, that she feels very guilty about it. And she doesn't like having written that speech. And since then, that's when she's changed and become more about doing relief work, and become open to church and whatnot. And so she's not happy about having to re-enter this life, which I think that's very interesting to learn all that.
Yes, and I absolutely agree with that. Yeah, I alluded to earlier. You get a sense already when he's like, I never thought you would go to church, let alone be a pastor, that there was a shift at some point in her past, a change, and you get more into that in that scene that you just referred to. Yeah, and I do find that all very interesting. That now she's been thrown back into this life. So I'm wondering how much, if it's going to affect her a little bit. And I don't see her going full on like, she's all for war or anything like that. But I wonder if it's gonna, affect her in ways that she would rather not, negatively a little bit. So I think it's going to be really interesting watching this character going forward.
Well, I think the Secretary General is going to be getting maybe a different speech, a different approach than what he is thinking that he's going to get. Because, yeah, you can definitely tell that his memory, the reason pulling it is that latched onto that big famous speech that she obviously is not very connected with anymore. She's much more into the peaceful approach to things. So I think, like I said, that's going to add an interesting dynamic. Because you have somebody who is not a yes person, that doesn't feel the need to be there, might have an obligation in the sense of what she can benefit, not to herself, but what she can benefit in order to help other people, is I think what the discussions will be going on, what she's going to be bringing to the table is going to maybe be a nice counter to Ehrenreit's approach. Speaking of, you're going to have the devil and the angel on each of the Secretary General's shoulders, I think represented by these two characters.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree. And I think that's going to be an interesting dynamic, because as we have seen that the Secretary General is a bit susceptible to suggestion. And so it would be, because when Avasarala was there, we saw that he got sort of both sides. And it's great that he has this other, now that she's gone, there's another person to speak reason. So it's going to be interesting to see how much of that reason seeps in, and will it override all the poison that Ehrenreit's spewing in his air. And you brought up earlier a good point that could lead to a direct conflict between Ehrenreit and Anna, because they're obviously, and you can tell in that one scene, that was a really great scene, because all played in subtext, like they were just chatting, haha, but you can see the text between the actors, the way they played it, the dirty looks they were shooting at each other, that they do not like each other at all.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think, excuse me, I do think that we should see some kind of conflict between those two characters at some point, because I think it's already been foreshadowed a little bit. You can already tell that they do not like each other at all.
Oh, come on, that's where all the best relationships start off. They start off in hate and grow into, I guess, more hate, probably, with these.
Yeah. Absolutely. Any thoughts on so in this, we also get her with the Skype call talking to her wife and their daughter, which I thought was really interesting. Soon the backstory. I mean, this is the kind of backstory we got in the novels too, but it was interesting saying that in the future there's going to be a Christian priest who's the head of her own church, who's married to another woman. They have the daughter together. I thought, and in my review, I said that was probably. I love the way they played it. They didn't like hammer. Hey, guess what? It was just like subtle. And it was just natural, because that's how it will be in this world, which is great. So I thought that scene was amazing as well.
Yeah, and then, I mean, at first, like, I didn't know who that person was. I never crossed my mind that it would be her wife, because you don't associate, religious people with being openly gay in today's world. So, at first I thought that was a coworker or something like that, because, you wouldn't expect that. But when you find out, oh, okay, so it's totally cool for this pastor, head of the church, whatever, to be, you know, openly married to a woman in the future. That's totally fine. And I was like, oh, cool. That's cool. You know, yeah, I did like that once you get that realization that's what was going on. Yes, that it was handled well. That was good.
Well, they've had so much in the past, you know, of like, you know, any same-sex relationships have been, you know, really thrown out there as this, oh, it's a big thing. What I've noticed a lot with shows now, and definitely Expanse did really perfectly, I think, well with this, is it's just matter-of-factly brought up. It's not a big thing. It's not focused on. It's not, you know, these types of relationships now are just becoming, as our culture integrates them more into them naturally, it is becoming less of a thing and more of just an aspect of this storyline is, well, we've got two people and they're married. Yeah, they happen to be the same sex, but that's it. And I love that fact. They just did it without doing anything large to be like, look at this, check this out. We're being cutting edge. It's like, no, that's just where our society is moving. And the fact that we're just taking it naturally is this is where things are going to be. I like that. I applauded that. Again, it was simple. It wasn't standing out. It was just two people in a relationship, like you would see with any other, or traditionally in a male female relationship. Now it's just two women, and it's just taken, like I said, very naturally.
Exactly, and that's why I think it works so well, because it didn't call attention to themselves, and the scene was so subtle. But yeah. Anyway, any other thoughts on Pastor Anna before we move on to a different storyline?
I'm good. I don't.
Good. Okay. Cool. So let's go ahead and talk about the final storyline. That's Jules Pierre Mal. Now, this was really interesting because we get sort of a behind the scenes look, and it really differentiates Jules Pierre Mal from Aaron Wright, and we actually find out Aaron Wright is more of a bloodthirsty, idiotic asshole than Mal is, although Mal's no angel either. He has his demons as well, but we do see the differences between them. And also, of course, Strickland, it was interesting seeing him and his interactions with May. This is something we didn't get in the novels. To see actually Strickland interacting with May and to see that May is alive and well. Of course, we found out at the end of the season 2 finale that she was alive and well, but to actually see him, and this, I love, like I said this in my review, I love the way Strickland is like so good with kids. He's like, oh, hi, bye. And as soon as she leaves the room, he's like, the smile instantly drops and he's like the evil guy again. So it just makes him even more of a despicable character. And the fact that he was able to convince Jules Pierre Mal to keep going with the proto-molecule when Jules Pierre Mal wanted to give up just shows you that he's a pretty despicable guy as well. But he's kind of similar to the other sort of evil scientists that we've seen on the show before. He's a bit of a sociopath and all he cares about is the science. But with Jules Pierre Mal, I thought we got a really interesting character revelation with him because it revealed that he realizes that the proto-molecule is something to not be fucked with, at least to some degree, because he realizes like that Aaron Wright and these other lackeys are taking it lightly, that like Earth almost got destroyed, and he's not happy at the prospect of Aaron Wright using the hybrids to wipe out Mars. He doesn't want to wipe out humanity. He just wants to make a buck. So he's seeing like the dangers of what he's playing with, and realizing that the proto-molecule is something, you know, that'd be taken a bit more seriously. But then on the other hand, he's convinced by Strickland, no, I do have a way to control it. It's like, okay, go ahead and do that because then I can make some money. So those interesting interactions. So what are you guys' thoughts on Jules Pierre Mal and this whole thing?
Yeah, I thought that was interesting too, because prior to that, I kind of thought he was totally on board with, you know, at all costs, whatever, we got to go forward with the proto-molecule. So to see some little, you know, seeds of doubt in him that, oh, maybe we need to just stop this, was kind of interesting. Now, of course, I haven't read the books, but I'm curious to see if that blossoms any further, if at any point in the future he turns, or if he regrets at all what he's been doing, or if he just continues to okay, whatever it takes to make money. But I did think it was really interesting, to see that little seed of doubt in him. I actually honestly didn't expect it. So yeah, that was interesting.
Well, it's also fun as you always have, like, it's great when you can see your villains and then find that there is someone even more villainous than that villain. It just keeps getting worse because, Mal's behind this and is all for a buck and is, integrating and working with Mars and Earth, both kind of at the same time and against each other. And then you have Strickland, which, I think, Mark, you're right. Very sociopathic, using emotions to get to his to achieve his goals, but not connected to them at all. I think that does make it really creepy in all of those scenes with May, how he's just, oh yeah, it's all great, and then he's like, by the way, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to inject you with this proto-molecule. Really just it's that progression of evil and darkness which I think we need to see. It was definitely interesting with Mal to kind of have that moment of revelation of like how dangerous this is. This is not something we can just manipulate. It's too bad. We got to kind of stop it because it will take us over all. And then Strickland just like, no, wait, I've found something else that will be useful to us. I think that works because, again, it gives us a larger villain. We already didn't like Strickland, we already had issues with him. But now we really get to see much more of the depth of his willing to manipulate and to sacrifice those that he has gotten to trust him. I really can't wait for Holden and the crew to show up there and start picking them apart.
Yeah, and I wanted to add too that I thought it was really kind of creepy and a little sad, the scene with the older boy who shows May his arm with the protomolecule, and he's like, "Oh, isn't that really cool?" Like that the fact that they absolutely have no idea what is happening to them, and to the fact where he thinks is kind of cool, and that May and these other kids are just completely trusting in Strickland, who we know to be this sociopath who does not care about them at all. But how they believe everything he says and they completely trust him. So that scene to me was really like just really hit like how, just kind of just fucked up the whole thing is that these kids are like, oh wow, look at my arm, it's really cool. Like they just have no clue what's happening to them.
Yeah, and it speaks a lot to Jules Pierre Mal's character too, that he sees that manipulation. He's like, yeah, I approve. Go ahead and go forward. That he has the disconnect as well. Like, even though he does have some sense of morality or some sense of at least self-preservation of not being an idiot because he doesn't want the protomolecule to wipe out all life in the solar system, but he's still a feelingless, greedy asshole who's willing to kill willy-nilly, manipulate children in order to get what he wants. And so, so it makes Mal a more dynamic character, if not a good guy. It makes him sort of more dynamic in that regard. And I always thought this about Mal, because I always thought that he was portrayed more as someone, and going back and watching the first two seasons, I got this feel too, that he was actually believes and that he's doing something for the greater good. He believes this is going to benefit humanity. And so that's why when he sees like humanity's destruction, he's against it, but he has sort of no moral compunction about killing whoever he needs in the process. And of course, getting rich, of course, is a huge factor in that as well. But it's interesting. And the one question I have that I think is interesting is the relationship between Ehrenreich and Mal, because we saw send him a message like, give me this weapon now, and Mal just very commanding. He's not one to be intimidated. He's like, hey, my assets are still frozen, my family's still being held, fix that. Until you fix that, you ain't getting shit. And so I think that's very interesting. And plus we see Ehrenreich back in like the UN building. He's still talking to like, oh yeah, we're gonna get Mal, blah blah blah. So he's kind of in the pickle. It makes me wonder if he can't get the weapon he wants until he unfreezes his assets. But how is he going to unfreeze his assets because everyone's out for blood back in the UN with Mal? So it does make me question how he's going to proceed.
Well, that's good. Ehrenreich's painted himself in a corner. We're all fine with that, I think. And it does show that, again, that's that interesting power dynamic between all of these people. It's like, I want this, and Mal's willing to do this, but you need to do these favors. It's like no one is really giving an inch in that. I mean, it makes that dynamic interesting between them, especially since we have, on Ehrenreit's side, the Secretary General really kind of bowing to all of his suggestions. And here Ehrenreit is dealing with somebody who he can't really manipulate, who can stand fast against him. And that creates a lot more, like I said, of an interesting character dynamic. And yeah, now Ehrenreit's in a position. Does he find a way to take the pressure off of Mao? Does he find a way to sort of forgive him? Does he just do all of this, again, further in the shadows, which could only possibly future implicate him into his dealings there with Mao? And that gets back to Avasarala, is what is she going to do? She's got the recording that shows that Ehrenreit and Mao were kind of working together. How long until she's able to expose that? Or are they going to drag that out more? Is this really going to then throw Ehrenreit into a position? And if he's exposed, then what does that mean for the Secretary General? Does he stay fast to the course, or is he now lost with his pursuit of the war? So the interaction of these dynamics really stand the possibility of totally messing with everyone's plans, which is a blast to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I don't know. I had this theory that maybe Ehrenreich was going to try to come up with, I know land where we can get Mal, but first we have to unfreeze his assets and let his family go, and then we can get him. I wonder if that will be his, like, he'll say sell that to Gillis.
That's it. It'll be a tease. It'll be like, this is how we flush him out. We've got to make him completely free, and then he'll make a mistake. Trust me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. So, I mean, all right. I want to talk a bit more about May, and you talked a bit about this earlier. The scene with that other boy showing the blue goo coming out. I think it was really interesting to see sort of her perspective, where she's being convinced by this other boy who's apparently, extremely naive, that the work, she's going to be cured and everything's going to be great. But it seems like she has more sort of trepidation than this other boy. I wonder if that's just because she's a younger girl, or if she's maybe realizing she can kind of see Strickland's facade. I think maybe she can a little bit.
Girls are smarter than boys. That's why. Well, I do. And it's also, I think, it's, what's I think serving May is her connection with her father, and I think that's going to help ground, because she's not trusting Strickland because she can't see her dad, and if her dad was there and okaying everything, I think she'd be a lot more okay with what's going on. But she was already pulled through the station. She was already put inside the pod and taken away. Now she's woken up away from everything. So I think the fact that with her strong connection with her dad, his absence, I think, is only pushing her doubt as to what's going on. She feels that something is definitely wrong here, and I'm hoping that from a character standpoint, she gravitates and holds on to that a little bit more.
Yeah, hopefully at some point she does. It seems to me still at this point she's drinking the Kool-Aid that Strickland is feeding her, but she is having little seeds of doubt. So hopefully, yeah, that will grow. But I mean, right now, like, she's a child, he's an adult, he's very, very convincing. So I think it's going to be really hard for her to break out on her own. But it'll be interesting to see how much more her doubt grows, and how if she's able to, like, stop trusting him. So yeah, I'll be interested to see.
Yeah, Yeah, I really like the direction they took with these two characters and fleshing out the villain more. I think any good show, movie, or anything has like really dynamic villains, and I think we have Strickland, we have Jules Pierre Mao, we have Aaron Wright, and they're all evil, but in different ways. And I think that really works. It seems like Aaron Wright's more the reckless kind. That Mal is right that he would just go out and kill all of humanity if it was up to him, and so Mal seems to have trepidation as well on actually giving him full service because he knows that this idiot could lead to the end of the human race.
Aaron wants war. I think he wants the power developed out of that conflict. He wants that positioning, and I think that's the way that he sees it. Mao is coming at it from more of a business sense as to what's going to work from a profit margin, I think. And then you have Strickland, who is obsessed with the science and how far he can push that, which always creates recklessness because they always want to sort of push levels further and further. So, yeah, they each have their different motivations, and this is where they're all kind of colliding. Can they work together? Can they not? Strickland can induce Mao's sense of self-preservation or override that by showing, no, we can control it. Here's evidence, and that seemed to be all that Mao needs, you know. And I don't even think Mao cares so much necessarily about the war as long as he comes out of it from a profitable he's alive at the end of it,
Yeah.
and in a good position. Whereas for Aaron Wright, that war and all those weapons are simply a means for him to get to the top. So yeah, everybody is kind of pursuing their own little power directions. It's just where those are able to work together, they'll work together, and when they're not, Mao and Aaron right now, we can't work together until this stuff is settled out. Then we're not gonna work together. Which creates its own conflict.
Yeah, and I do love, I mentioned this in my review, I love the social commentary that this could relate to, modern times or even historical moments, that the war is just being fought by some ambitious people who want to increase their power, and I think that's a really interesting commentary there. Cool. So any last thoughts on Jules Pierre Mao, Strickland, or any of that?
I'm good. I think we've covered it well.
Yeah,
cool.
Their days are numbered. It's just to see how big that number is.
Yeah.
Cool, great. So I think we'll go ahead and wrap up our discussion for The Expanse. Yeah, I know, Akton, last week you said you're not sort of big into predictions when it comes to Expanse, but do you have any sort of expectations when it comes to sort of Avasarala and Holden coming together for next week's episode?
For next week's episode, I mean, I think the preview gave us a good look at it, that there's going to be some conflict. I think beyond that, I do think eventually they will figure out that they really want the same thing, and they will end up working together. But certainly in the beginning, I think through next week's episode, at least, there will be conflict between the two parties for sure. Because Holden is they still want to go help Prax, and obviously Bobby and Avasarala have bigger fish to fry than that. So. But I think eventually they're going to come together and figure it out. Just probably not by next week's episode.
Yeah, I think pacing-wise, how they'll probably focus most of this season for the Rossi crew is going to be getting May. I think that will probably be stretched out through most of this season. So yeah, next week will just be the sort of settling the conflict, the discussion between Avasara and Holden, her goals versus his goals, the small versus the large, and ultimately we'll find out, like I said, is that her motivation, what she wants, is going to be accomplished by going with Holden and the rest of the crew. So she might be sort of an unwilling passenger in the short term. Because she doesn't really have a choice. She can't decide anything, and she's got no other real ship to travel off on her own. I mean, I guess they have the little rocket one, but that's not super effective versus a a whole UN that's after her. So I think next week will be that bit of conflict where she'll have to just go, okay, I will stick with you guys until you can take me where we want, even if it is back up to Io, where Rosie wants to go. Yeah, so I that's sort of how I see this season kind of playing out with them. Starting with a little conflict, and then as the mission progresses, they're finding that their goals are lining up much more than either of them really think.
Though I wonder if in next week's episode, Avasarala is even going to be conscious by the end of it, because in the preview, the conflict is between Bobby and Holden, and Avasarala, when they show her on the screen, she's still like sick and out of it. And so I hope so. I would hope by the end of next week's episode, she's at least able to speak, even if she's, you know, sick and speaking slowly, but able to express her opinion. But I think initially the conflict will be with Bobby, but then once Avasarala kind of recovers, it'll definitely be her kind of taking the forefront.
Yeah, and I think that may be the case. Next week's episode will mainly be about Bobby's interaction with Holden, and then maybe Avasarala won't be fully herself again until like a couple next episode after that or something like that, maybe. But when Avasarala does, like, you know, the one thing I think is interesting is that she's a politician. So I'm really curious to see how, like, she might be able to manipulate Holden into doing what she wants, because she's very good at sort of, finding what people want and finding common ground and sort of getting them to do what she wants and doing her politician thing, or sort of maybe even relating to him on that level. Whereas I think Draper's going to be very clumsy and sort of bad at that because she's more of a Marine. So that's why Holden's going to be more standoffish at first, possibly.
Yeah, I agree. I think those are good points. I think that once Avasarala is kind of recovered and she can speak a little bit more, she'd probably be better at, politic and Holden, kind of maybe manipulating him a little bit. Whereas, Draper is just going to be, she's just easy to argue with and say, no, you're wrong. And she's just not good at politics the way that Avasarala is. So, yeah, I agree with you completely.
And that's a very interesting dynamic, having the Draper and Avasarala team, because in this past couple episodes we saw Avasarala is completely out of her element and Draper was totally in her element, but then we get into a more negotiation situation where it'll be the other way around. So I think that's a very interesting dynamic between the two characters.
Oh, and did we hear any? I don't remember. Did we catch any more about our other two crew members that got in the escape pod from?
Yeah, they didn't mention it in this episode. Cotillard and that other tech guy. I can't remember his name. Random tech guy. I hope that we don't see too much of him. I think he's done.
Yeah. Well, the only mention of it was that Draper said, "Sorry about Cotillard," and she said, "Do you need?" Something along the lines of, "Do you know he's dead?" or something like that. And she says, "Well, save your sorries for later." So that's that.
Well, she said, I interpret that differently, because she said, "Did you kill him?"
Yeah, did she kill him?
I interpret that as meaning like Draper, even if he did die, Draper wasn't responsible for killing him, so don't apologize. That's how I took
it. Yeah, I guess so. I took it to mean like we don't know he's dead yet, but
it could possibly.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they've set that out, that he's not. They don't know if he's dead. I believe that he's out. But is that going to be something that Avasarala is going to bring up? Is hey, we got to go back for my man who's floating around inside of an escape pod out there before we do something next? That might actually be their first kind of conflict for people.
I think it's possible.
Yeah,
I mean, I think you gotta still have Cotillard alive. Otherwise, why didn't you just kill him before? But because I kind of thought he was dead at the end of season 2. So, but that other dude, like, I hope he just falls out as an air hatch or something. I just hope he falls out of space.
I don't want him to die, but I just.
Well, it's just a character. It's not a real human being. It's just,
just send them off to like, okay, I'm going home now. I'm going to.
Just get him off the show. Like, that character is pointless and obnoxious. But I definitely want to see Cotillard alive and well.
Yeah, he'll pop up at a bar in episode 8. Just be like, "Hey, God, you don't believe what happened to me."
No, it's like the whole Poochie thing. Is I'm returning to my home world now. Goodbye. Yeah, Simpsons reference. Anyway, so I think that's good. We'll go ahead and end our discussion there. Thank you guys so much for joining and talk about the Expanse, and I hope you guys will join me again for future episodes. So just quick plug out where people can find you. Darrin, where can people find you? What are you up to?
Hey everyone, you can always find me over at D's Reviews. We are starting Westworld Season 2 this evening. Very excited about that. We just started Fear the Walking Dead, which I haven't liked the past couple seasons. The premiere for this season looked really good, has gotten me back and intrigued for it. So hoping things about that. Legion Season 2 also going on right now. Plus, you know me, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Got 4 more episodes left in the season. Very excited about that. And then we'll be doing Preacher this summer.
Cool. Akton?
Oh, hey, I'm sure a lot of you watching Mark's channel know who I am. I'm Akton Tamko, and I haven't done a whole lot on my channel recently, but I do have some things coming really soon. I'm actually in the works right now. I actually have a Game of Thrones Season 8 prediction video. It's the wild and crazy predictions because I don't know anything about any spoilers about anything. Also, it probably is going to be a little bit sarcastic because I'm not going to be full-on sarcastic, but there's definitely, like, I'm not very optimistic about Season 8, but, I've come this far, so I'm still going to watch it, and I'm still going to make videos about it, but some of my content might be a little bitter and sarcastic, but that I just started making that, so that should be hopefully up for you within the next day or so. And then beyond that, I have 2 more videos planned. I plan on doing reviews of 2 new shows that I've watched, similar to what Mark does on his channel. He calls it quick reviews, where it's 2 new shows and he just talks about it quickly. I won't call it quick review because Mark has the copyright on that. but I'll be talking about 2 new shows that I've watched and giving my review for them, spoiler free. And then I'll probably, I don't know if I'll do a full-on video. It might just be me sitting here talking live with you guys, but I'm sure I might want to talk about the Westworld premiere or some point, which is tonight. Might want to talk a little bit about Westworld at some point. And, of course, I will continue to appear with Mark on the Expanse videos, and I may do my own reviews at some point in time, too. So Akton Tamko's channel is going to be more active than it's been in a while, so check it out.
Cool. And Alexander in the chat earlier asked for no Westworld fans here, and I know, Akton, you just touched on that. But, Darrin, you're going to be covering Westworld weekly, right? Am I correct?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. The first season was mind-blowing. I love anything that really deals with the ideas of identity and reality and things like that. So a lot of great questions brought up last season. I'm really looking forward to seeing where they're going. And we should be seeing some more parks, I think, this season also. So that's just going to kind of expand the whole conflict and everything that's going on. So, yeah, really excited about that.
Yeah, I've decided I'm actually going to wait until the season's over before I watch it even. I'm going to wait till the season's over and binge it all at once because I enjoyed binging season 1, so I want to binge season 2 as well. So I'm going to have to try to avoid the spoiler there, so you guys have to be careful not to spoil me until the season.
So just don't watch our videos.
Yeah, well, I won't watch the video, but I'm talking about commenters as well.
Oh, the commenters.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're just going to pretend it's a Netflix show then.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, and wait till it's over and binge it. But yeah.
It'll save you from all that weekly tension right there where you're like, what's going to happen next?
Exactly. All right, cool. Well, yeah, so you know me, Mark, my channel's Enchantment of Eternity. If you're finding me for the first time, I do weekly episode reviews of The Expanse, and also hopefully we'll do these weekly live streams of The Expanse as well. And I also do some videos about the books and comparing the books to the show, which I'm still on season 2 on that one, so I'm just getting caught up. I also cover other stuff like Star Trek. Got tons of Star Trek. At the moment, I'm doing every Star Trek movie. So 1 week at a time, I'll cover doing all 13 Star Trek movies in order. All 13 movies with the name Star Trek, I should say. Anyway. Yeah, and also I think I'm also gonna do some Game of Thrones video at long last. I had like a 6-month break. I'm gonna start doing it. It won't be predictions like what Akton's doing, but I'll do more of the character analysis videos that I've done in the past and stuff like that. So I'm gonna try to sort of weave my way back into Game of Thrones. So if you're into that, you can check that out too. So anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.